Hey, it's Vanessa from CraftyGemini.com, and today's sewing tutorial is on how to make a shopping cart cover for your small child. If you're like me, you probably don't like to put your small kids, especially babies and toddlers, in those nasty shopping carts at all the different stores that we have to go to. So I always like to keep one of these on hand in my car whenever I'm out and about with my son to make sure that he's kept away from all those germs. Let's go over the supplies you'll need and we'll jump right into the project. You're going to need a ruler, a pair of sharp scissors, your rotary cutter with the corresponding mat underneath, a large safety pin, some pins, a marker, 1.5 yards of 1/2 inch wide elastic, and then you're going to need your fabric. So you'll need 2 pieces of fleece that measure 45 inches by 42 inches each. So the first thing you want to do is take one of your pieces of fleece fabric measuring 45 by 42 and fold it in half. Okay, it doesn't matter along which side, it's not going to make a difference. After you fold it in half, as you see I've done here already, you're going to fold it in quarters now. So we want to make sure that it's like this. And here just pretend that this is fully squared, right? So if I had folded it in 4, make sure that you have the folded edges down here. You're not going to cut on this side. And then what you want to do is just take your rotary cutter and just gently cut a little curve like this. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you have something that's like a big curved platter like that, you can use that as your guide, but I kind of just eyeballed it. This hole here for one of the leg holes, what I did was I just took a CD and placed it measuring from one end here to 19 inches. And at the 19-inch mark, I tried to line up the center of the CD at the 19-inch mark. And then I just got my fingers and measured 4 fingers up from the fold. And that's where I placed the CD. And then I just take some kind of a marking device. And I took a marker in this case because this is fleece and it's fuzzy and the chalk won't really stick on it too good. And then just eyeball about 3/4 of an inch or 1 inch around the perimeter of the CD. And then you get the size hole that you want. Just so you have an idea, the circle, you can also use like a saucer or a platter. This is about 6.5 inches in diameter or 6.25. Just something roughly that size would work fine. Now the line that you see down there that I have is actually for the belt loops. So if you're going to be putting a younger child in the shopping cart and you want to use this cover, you're going to want to secure them in with some kind of a seat belt. So we're just going to make the mark for that. And to do that mark, what I did was I just measured from the other end of my fold here, measured about 7 inches, and it's about 4.5 inches up from the fold. So 4.5 inches up this way, 7 this way, and then I just made a mark about 3 inches wide. So here's the second fabric that I chose to use, and again it's folded in half widthwise, the same way that it comes off the bolt in your store. And I'm going to line up with the fold down here. I'm going to line up my pattern piece, right, that I've already done, right on top of it, matching up the folds. I'm going to cut around it, and then we're going to also cut through these circles, through all 4 layers. So I like to pin down around it so it holds all 4 layers where they should be before I actually start cutting. Just cut through each layer individually if you have to. You're also going to do the same thing in this slot here. It's not really a hole you're cutting, just a slit. So we've cut our holes through all 4 layers, and that accounts for all of the leg holes that we need. And then we've also done the same thing for the belt strap. Next thing you want to do is take each of these pieces individually to your sewing machine, and you're going to zigzag stitch real nice and close to the edge of all the openings. Make sure that you're not sewing it with the pieces folded together. You want to open it up like this and then go around it in a zigzag stitch here and here. And then when you come to the belt loops, you're going to do the same thing. You want to zigzag stitch around the openings to secure that hole there. So I'm just going to do a basic zigzag stitch around the opening to secure it in place. It doesn't matter if you come off the edge a little bit. Fleece is really stretchy and it'll tend to move on you, so we're just doing this to secure the edges and give it a little decorative touch. So once you finish stitching around your leg hole openings and the belt loop openings, you're going to take one of your fabrics and just lay it with the pretty side facing up. You want to make sure that the fleece you've chosen, either it does or it doesn't have a right or wrong side, but just make sure that you're choosing the side you want to show on the outside, and you're putting that side facing up right now. Then you're going to take your other piece of fabric and matching up all the openings, you're going to lay it with the pretty side facing down. Here I've matched up both of my belt loop openings here, and what I'm going to do is just place 2 pins on the outsides of it just to hold it in place right there. Do the same thing to the other one. And do the same thing to our leg holes, making sure that the fabric is laid nice and flat. Now what we're going to do is pin around all our raw edges here, because this is where we're actually going to sew. Now that we've pinned all the way around our shopping cart cover, what you want to do, like in any other project that you're going to be flipping inside out, is to mark the space that you're going to leave open to remind yourself when you're sewing not to sew there. So I'm just going to lightly, for something as big like this and working with fluffy fabric like fleece, you maybe want to leave like a 10-inch opening. So now I'm going to go to my sewing machine and start on either end here, back stitch to secure the ends. And I'm just going to sew all the way around using my presser foot as my guide, and I'm going to sew all the way around the big circle of my shopping cart cover. What we're going to do now is sew another line of stitching all the way around, but this time it's going to be what secures our elastic inside in a casing. So I'm going to measure about 3/4 of an inch, or an inch if you just want to be safe, or if you're using wider elastic. And that's where I'm going to stitch my next sewing line. Just going to start somewhere where I started before, on the end of my opening, or on one of my openings. I'm going to measure about 3/4 of an inch away from my previous stitching line. So if this is my first line, I'm going to start sewing around there. And so I just want to eyeball this here and kind of just ride the presser foot all the way, the entire length around again. So before we flip anything inside out, you want to feed the elastic through the casing that you've created with your stitching. And to do that, I just grab one end of the elastic, put my big safety pin through it, close it, okay? And then I'm going to get the safety pin head and fit it in there, in between those 2 stitching lines. And I'm just going to, with this hand, grab the head of the safety pin, and with this hand, push it, and just pull this. And you're going to continue to do that the entire way around. One thing you want to keep in mind is the end of this, you may want to either put another safety pin or just pin it somewhere to your project. Because as you start feeding this stuff through, you don't want the end to go in without being held down. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pull out this elastic and meet it up on the other end. And in my case, I have a little more elastic than I need. I like to gauge it from the 1.5 yards, and then you can kind of eyeball what you'll need or what you won't need. So I'm just going to cut off some of it because I still need some extra to even this stuff out. You're going to go to your sewing machine and lay one on top of the other so they're both flat. And just zigzag stitch back and forth to secure this in place. You can see where I just zigzag stitched back and forth, and then I just trimmed away the excess elastic. Now I'm just going to even it all the way out by stretching out my shopping cart cover. And you have 2 options right here. Because the fleece doesn't fray, you can actually just leave it like this without flipping it inside out. But if you don't want this edge to show, then what you can do is flip it inside out by reaching into your opening and flipping it all through. It's a little tricky, but what you want to do is stretch out the elastic while you fold the fabric in. And I like to just put a few pins here, and then we're just going to sew close to this folded edge just to hold it in place. If you catch the elastic, it won't be that big of a deal, but try not to. Now that it's pinned closed, just go to your sewing machine and just use a straight stitch or a zigzag stitch, whatever you want to do, but I'm going to go straight stitch and close to the edge just to hold that opening shut. So to sew this opening shut, I know that the elastic is not in the casing, but that's not really going to be a problem in this case because it's such a small piece out of the entire length of it. What you want to do though, since it's elastic, is to pull your fabric as you stitch so that you can make sure that the fabric is nice and taut. So here's a little tricky part. Now what we need to do is kind of to secure these two layers to each other. So I'm just going to reach through both layers and again match up our openings. So for the belt loop, like you did in the beginning, just put 2 pins on the outsides of the opening. And so you're going to go to your sewing machine and just use a basic straight stitch and just stitch somewhere around. It doesn't have to be that close to it, but you just want this to be close together so it's easy for you to find when you're trying to slip seatbelt through there. So we're done sewing around the belt loop openings, and now we're going to do the exact same thing we did, but to the leg holes. Okay, so we finished sewing the last little part, which was just taking the basic straight stitch around our leg hole openings, and that should secure it nicely in place. If you're a stickler for things like this, you can go ahead and trim this real close, or you can use bias binding and cover it up, but for me, I don't really care. It looks cute, and it'll hold up in place. And this is really kind of weird to show when it's like this. It just looks like a big pair of underwear. But as you can see, it will fit over the shopping cart like this. Okay? And I'll show you now how it looks. So I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial on how to make your very own shopping cart cover out of 2 pieces of fleece and some elastic. It's real simple, and this is really the basic and most beginner level version that I could come up with to make one. If you want to start experimenting, or you're more of an advanced beginner or maybe even an intermediate, you want to try using maybe just cotton woven basic quilting fabrics, you can do what I did here, which was use basically the regular cotton version of the same fabric that I found at my local shop, and you can use just 2 pieces of fabric. And what I did for the center to give it that extra bulk is added a layer of batting. You do the same technique, but you just add another layer of batting. And then to finish off the edges, what I did was some bias binding that I created out of fabric. So there are definitely more advanced steps of making a shopping cart cover, but I tried to keep it as basic as I could in this one so any of you out there can do it. And as usual, be sure to upload pictures of your completed projects on our Facebook page. We always love to see what you make from the Crafty Gemini tutorials.
Ay, qué linda.